So now I'm going to ask to ask the panelists to join us to the stage to debate about ethical leadership in critical time, in time of uncertainties. Ms. Safak Pavey, she is Senior Advisor to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees. Please. Mr. Chong, he's founder and CEO of Consulus from Singapore, author of Creative Change. Please, Mr. Chong. Mr. Ignacio Packer, Executive Director of the Co-Initiative of Change Foundation. Mr. Packer. Okay. Please, and Mr. Obiora, Chairman of the Enugu State Government Economic Advisory Committee from Nigeria. Good, and perhaps a chair for me. I will stay there. Not too right. Ethical leadership. I need a microphone. Thank you. So, ethical leadership in a critical time. To be honest, we can't say that ethical leadership is always present in the current world of politics, business, or relationships between nations. First question I'm going to ask to each panelist: what is an ethical leadership? Laurent Chong, you're well known in your country as a leader in innovation, in strategy. Could you explain your vision of ethical leadership? What is for you? Can you explain? Take your microphone.
First of all, thank you for having me, and it's a great joy to be here. I think in short, ethical leadership is about this sense of responsibility to the common good. How much do you care? How much does it matter to you that the world does better today and tomorrow? If you don't have that sense of care, if you don't have that responsibility, you will never be ethical. And the challenge with unethical leadership is because the people who do that believe that the world can afford their failures, can afford how they expand the global trust that we have built up over many decades. And Fadi mentioned that we are coming to the 75th anniversary of the Geneva Convention. And I often think that after the Second World War, how much the global leaders of those days felt that it is critical to define a new world order on the basis of the common good. And they did so not simply as victors, but they did so because they felt a great sense of care and responsibility for the common good. So I think we have a great deficit of leaders who don't care. And we have a great number of leaders who feel that they can continue to afford leadership failures because they think that, the issue of the day doesn't require them to be so responsible. So I think that in sum is my view.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chong, your advice is very precious. You are followed by 400,000 professionals followers on LinkedIn. You're from Singapore. It's a very competitive world, we can say. How can you manage to be to have an ethical attitude in such a competitive world?
Well, our founding leaders of Singapore, they understood that ethical leadership is a decision. And they were the youngest politicians of the time. They were graduates of the British Empire. They believe in autonomy and independence, but they had a great position and committed vision that ethical leadership is required to rebuild Singapore society. And I'll give you an example. In Chinese culture, giving gifts to politicians is quite a practice. And when the founding...
Not only in China.
Not only in China. But when the founding leaders of Singapore decided no politician will receive a gift, it's quite a thing to tell Asian politicians not to do so. And that's because they felt that there's a higher order of care you need to have for society, and they made it so. The other thing is, when the British Empire used to rule us, they were kind of a divide and conquer type of power, because they are a small country, and in order to manage bigger countries, better to divide and conquer and don't let people mingle. And again, the founding leaders of Singapore, because they decided that being ethical is by choice and decision, they put communities together, Malays, Chinese, Eurasians, all together, including the right of religious worship, according to the diversity of identity and religion, right? So again, it's not so much about they have to be ethical, but they made a decision to be ethical by choice and by design. And also because there's a higher order of care. And that's how Singapore benefited from that level of leadership, by care and for the common good.
Thank you. Ms. Safak Pavey, you're senior advisor to the UN High Commissioner for Refugees from Istanbul. Chong works in the private sector. You work in international organization. What is ethical leadership on a multilateral level for you, in your opinion?
Thank you for, first of all, for Globethics to invite us here with my esteemed also panelists here. It's a pleasure to give this kind of reflective space to us to speak about something different than just our work, but also on the philosophy level, cultural level, psychological level. I would like to start
I forget to say that you're very famous as a human rights activist, to a pacifist, journalist, a lot of titles.
Thank you very much, please. But also I'm very proud of having quitted Twitter, having had 1.4 million followers, who nevertheless still follow. So that is like a gift of sometimes taking the right path. So it is actually, I would like to bring the conversation from the cultural level, which you have spoken to, and a state system that has actually aimed to transform the culture. I would like to bring us to a psychological level as well, because one really wonders when we are visiting this question of ethical leadership, where does our personality, how does our personalities shape that we become unethical or ethical? There is an impressive study. When I was preparing for this, I actually came across an impressive study done by Zurich University of psychiatry and gerontology psychology departments over the years. It was concluded in 2013, done over, I mean, the case studies were actually over 350,000 adults to understand and come to the conclusion that the character traits do not change after the age of 13. Mm-hmm. And that gives us actually a very big clue that family life, family values, on top of it, the sociocultural environment and the geography, we
education,
have a say, and then education until a certain point, 13. They say very conclusively in that study, which is in the open environment of Zurich University, where everyone can reach. Very interesting study, and it actually summarizes what William James, an American philosopher, used to say, that when you reach 30, one's character is like so much of a plaster that it would never take any other shape again. Mm. So it actually just reinforces also a proverb in my culture, which is Turkish saying, is that the character doesn't come out unless you die. So, so it just reinforces one another. Therefore, it brings us actually, well, they worked around 5 main character traits, which included, which is very interesting because it brings us actually all the character traits that we're looking at ethical leadership in adulthood, you know, role modeling and everything else. But they actually looked at how through the criteria of openness, empathy, and honesty, agreeableness, being transparent, all these things. And then they actually carry on as they were shaped by the age of 13. Therefore, I actually would like to very much, whether we want to leave it in the hands of our families or geographies, or we want to top it up by early education modules. I think that would be the one solution that can bring us in a more ideal space.
When you're looking the world today, the state of the world is rather discouraging. No,
Very much.
Do you see some hope today? I do hope you you see, or you think it's we are in a time of regression.
Yes, we have to. In the humanitarian space, if there is no hope left, then you cannot survive in that space. In either case, we have so many our great partners here. They know how difficult, because we live the consequences. I mean, we live, meaning that those that we are serving as well live the consequences of terrible decisions that are being taken bilaterally, sometimes multilaterally, which is polarizing the world further. So yes, I mean, that's what we say for a commoner. I mean, I've been a parliamentarian, so I also define myself as a commoner, as a member of the Commons, House of Commons. So, but I always think that as a commoner, that's our bread, right? Hope is our bread. So we need to continue in hoping, but how to build bridges and restore some of the hope in the multilateral system is that moving away from this minilateralism and moving away to a more solidarity space, sticking to the principles and ethical values. And there, I would really say what I'm doing under the High Commissioner right now is the multi-stakeholder partnership approach that we're promoting and bringing everyone at the table, every voice. That includes faith-based actors and religious leadership to provide also some moral compass. Yes, I explained some psychological, you know, I entered into the ethics from a psychological point of view. Psychology is, for the last century, has been the discovery and one of the most popular sciences. But this used to be done, the healing of the soul used to be done for centuries by the clergy. So that was their job. But now it can work together, I believe. We need to bring that ancient knowledge and philosophies into the table as well.
Ignacio, you represent here the co-foundation based in Switzerland, no? In Caux. The aim of the foundation is to build trust across the world's divides, to build a peaceful and sustainable world where people act in spirit of responsibility. It sounds a little bit utopic, no? Or your definition of ethical leadership?
You have to live with big ambitions, and I'll come back to that in a moment. I think you have to stand for values and get out of the way when you have to get out of the way. That's my definition of an ethical leader. When Martin Chong just left, but when he talked about 27% of women on parliament, it's also because men are not stepping down. When we look at organizations that are led by men, but keep on saying how important it is that we be more balanced, if more men would step down from their positions, that would help too. At Caux, we do a lot around storytelling and around ethical leadership, for instance, because it's important for leaders to tell their stories of how they have led in an ethical way. Just listening to the Prime Minister of New Zealand when she said her tank was empty, I think that's just extremely inspiring. And I think it's very encouraging also for people who are finding the way of being an ethical leader. An ethical leader aligns its values to its deeds. So wherever, whenever, has to stick to its values. And when Fadi, when you say that the pact, the UN pact for the future is going to New York with hardly any or no mention of ethics and of values, that is of course something that is absolutely incredible and can question how come ethical leaders have led for a document to be in that state. This is the moral element that we are missing at the moment in the state of the world we're in. And it's for each one of us, each individually, for us to stand up for this.
Ignacio, perhaps tell us what concrete initiative are you taking with the co-foundation to promote this world of values, of peace, of what kind of action?
I think the specificity of the organization is to be a movement. Mm-hmm. And where the focus is on how and the responsibility of each and every individual. We have a place above Montreux. Perhaps you've been there. Yes. We've never met, and you haven't been introduced, but I've never met you, but you have come so often to my living room.
But I know you. I know you because you were previous at the Terre des Hommes, no? That's right. So.
Okay, so in Caux, for instance, it's just to take an example, it's a center for dialogue where we don't organize ordinary conferences there. There are forums where people enter as who they are, whether they are head of state, we even had a Royal Highness last year, ambassadors, or farmers from the Canton de Vaud. And it is how we get inspired on the different levels, how each and everyone has to take a different commitment around aligning the values. And I think that is one of the key elements which is brought by a very different type of organization that is the Caux Foundation.
Lawrence Chong, do you know the Caux Foundation?
Yes.
Yes. So Obiora, you're a scholar, write a lot of things, teacher, professor, very involved in the society of your country, Nigeria, to promote a better society. And you're going to give us the point of view of Africa, the continent that has so much to contribute to the world. Tell us about your concrete action, perhaps, with your Catholic Institute of Development, Justice and Peace.
Thank you very, very much. First of all, my greetings and appreciation to the entire audience. I think it's a great conversation we are having around ethical leadership. Before I just answer that question, many people occupy positions which they should not occupy. There is a distinction between authority and position, or even power. Some people are given power but don't have authority. So what I find confusing is the use of the word leadership, when actually there should be followers and not leaders. So we have a world where not everybody can be a politician, first position, or be the leader of either a church or whatever it is. And all of a sudden, one buys it, leads the others, and they have to follow. And you are blind leading people who have eyes to see. So this is the dichotomy and the antinomy we have, that leadership, especially ethical leadership, is being piloted by people who don't have even the integrity to lead others as a point of start. Now, the next thing is to address your question, which I thank you very much for. A continent like Africa is very wealthy and rich in human resources, in natural resources, in wisdoms that are beyond time and space. And you find a continent being led by people who should not actually be their leaders. So that voices have now to come from those who feel called, who have the vocation, who have a passion, who have a desire to change, to add value, to do something, because each person is gifted. What we do at the Catholic Institute is to try to empower people, give them the voice which they normally have, but they have been prevented from having it, to even develop themselves and be that which they wish they could be. And it's been very, very successful in the areas of health, education, sponsorships, cultural activity, skills empowerment, and being the voice.
Thank you. Through education. Laurent Chong, time is running very fast. I'm really sorry. Laurent Chong, perhaps I told that your advice is very precious. What kind of advice would you like to share today with our audience in this issue of ethical leadership to improve all over the world?
Yeah, I think the unique lens my colleagues and I have in 23 countries, around the world is the problem of spotlight leadership. And what I mean is increasingly because leaders are under so much scrutiny, they have decision paralysis. They no longer want to make decisions, they want to make statements. And you have a conundrum there when leaders are not trusted to make the right decisions because they're so afraid to do so. So that's one crisis that we see, whether we are serving governments, multinationals, decision paralysis, right, because of spotlight leadership. The second issue is that our current environment actually favors unethical leadership than ethical leadership. There is no loss to be unethical. That's why you have the invasion of Ukraine, and that's why you have the crises, whether you're talking about economics, we talk about AI, we are dealing with a very real situation in the capital markets, where because of artificial intelligence, we will have more than 2/3 of capital in the power of artificial intelligence, determining the fate of more than 160 nations in the world. And there's no loss. No one will be fined, regulated, it's totally legitimate. So when unethical leadership is fueled and supported, and you have decision paralysis, you have a perfect power cake of what we call an explosive world order. Because leaders who are brave enough, they are few. In interreligious dialogue, we call this what we call an impasse of dialogue, when you are not able to cross over to the other side to understand. Which is why it is very interesting that even in interreligious dialogue, Pope Francis wrote this document with the Grand Imam of Al-Azhar to consider, because both religions have fought for centuries, to consider that both religions can come together to cross over to the other side and say their vision for a shared humanity. We don't have that conversation in the capital markets. We don't have that conversation even among politicians, right? So you have decision paralysis because of spotlight leadership. And then you have the cost. There's no cost to be unethical. So I think those two are very dangerous situations, at least from our observation around the world.
Safak, you told that you were a parliamentarian from Istanbul, former parliamentarian. You were honored in 2012 with the International Women of Courage Award by the United States Department of State. In your vision, what is the role of women? Does the woman have a special role in this fight for ethical leadership or in crisis?
Well, in every societal challenge that we have, I'm one of those believers very deeply that we have gender equality at the very core of it. The issues that are stemming in our societies, wherever it may be, whatever continent it may be, whatever harmful practices there may be, or inequality, it actually drops down to, for not having our kids, girls, boys, those kids with disabilities, non-disability, those without, are not sharing the same school benches equally next to each other. That's the issue. And the anger, the aggressiveness of cultures surfaces itself more on the women and children issues. So yes, I believe that ethical, for a more ethical world, there needs to be that reflected. That needs cultural transformation. You have mentioned of my parliamentarian hat as well, where I try to dedicate time to this. But in my view, and I presented it several times, my dear colleague Michael Weiner can remember from the Human Rights Council sessions sometimes when I was invited. That's my other home, by the way. So don't tell this High Commissioner. But I was trying to say as well there, articulated through my parliamentary journeys, I have seen that international norms, international law standards are there. But cultural transformation is not happening when the legislations are being adapted under those norms and standards. It stays like an accessory in the guest room, in the culture that it translates into. So that is where we need a lot of this more intercultural, interfaith dialogues and campaigns supporting legislative reforms. Otherwise, when you look at Pakistan, my dear peers there have tried very hard to transform, but transformation did not happen. If it is not topped up by a cultural campaign, legislation can stay there as a spaceship. So that's my view.
It's what you are trying to do in the co-foundation. What your comment on what Safak just said?
Yes, and I would compliment saying how it is important to move away from cynicism and to hope. Hope was mentioned many times, but hope is something active, not something that we talk about. And I realized how important that was about 10 years ago when I was in a meeting, a small meeting, with scientists who were just describing how we were going against the wall and so on in terms of environment. So that was 10 years ago. Didn't need the words of the pact at that time, and the rest of the group were religious leaders, so holding the norms, the values, and I felt very cynical about that. But I came out from that saying, no, we have to build around hope and around the inner development of each and every one of us. Systemic change would happen in that way. What are the skills and the qualities that individually we have to develop to be leaders, ethical leaders, not only when we talk in parliament and so on, but an ethical leader perhaps already in our communities, in our families. And that is something that Geneva has to play a role on. There is something which is called the Inner Development Goal Framework, which is a set of 23 skills and qualities. And this, for the moment, is spoken elsewhere. For instance, I'm invited for the Summit of the Future, the Habada, which is exactly on the same dates, because in New York and last year, we didn't manage to talk much about the inner development. So it is in Qatar that we're going to talk about that, and that there is a summit going on there where I don't know why, but they invited me as keynote speaker. But it's in Geneva too that we have to structure, and there are a number of organizations that I think are getting together around this effort to be bringing this need to develop these skills and qualities in a much more focused way. Without that, the Sustainable Development Goals, we would stay on what was said earlier on that technical perspective. Last year in New York, he was saying how we were regressing on the Sustainable Development Goals. 50% of the indicators are off track, 25 are regressing, and 25% are still ongoing. So something has to happen. It's not only about more commitments, more money, and so on. It is something where ethical leadership and this commitment to the values that were at a high cost after the Second World War. I stop there, sorry, I'm going over time.
Obiora, I will let you the final word. I suppose you're agree with all was said. You have a strong professional skill in human management, religious thought, leadership, and we just spoke about. I've spoken about the corruption in leadership all over the world, in your country too, in Africa too. What can we do to have ethical leadership to eliminate corruption, to eliminate special interest?
A very good question, and it will continue to remain a question.
It's a big question.
But what I find very important was even listening to the first speech by Professor Fadi when he spoke about truth. You have a world that denies that there is truth. When you don't have objective, agreeable realities, you subjective everything, and then you start wondering on which road to take. So we must establish and agree, first of all, that there is something globally, universally agreeable, just like we're talking about ethical leadership. I mean, Globethics is bringing us all here together to reflect on how we can be the practice of what we talk about. So teaching by doing, integrity is the word. And when you have it, things like corruption and so on, which are very clear issues because of the human condition of being created out of earth, dust, breakable. And this breakability of the human being makes the human being prone to weakness. But how do you engage a human being except by encouraging? You see, a shepherd takes care of sheep. And when they go astray, you bring them into the line. The same thing with SHIP, a ship that is driven by a captain. The captain steers through the waters. But you have now families where everybody does what you like, and there is no shepherd, and there is no driver for the men, like a pilot, a plane that is moving without a pilot. The condition of the world is that we are looking for persons with integrity, and it has nothing to do with gender. Not just to say 50% men, 50% women, but they don't have the quality. Some people who have the grace to be who they are, occupying their positions, can help the world be repositioned. It starts with education. It starts in the family. I had it. It starts in places where laws and rules are made, which people obey. It starts with agreeing that there are things that the human person is imbued with some rationality, with some qualities. The human being knows what is good, can aspire towards it. And this is what we must be preaching, so that ethical leadership, also what we are sharing these days through Globethics, convening us together, becomes that meeting point where we discover that we are all human, and we are all persons, and we have all rights. And there is nothing different from A to be, except that we are born on the same space and breathe the same air, therefore share the goods of this world. I love the word common good, because that's exactly from moving from person to the community. And that's where Africa has to do its work and bring its ancient wisdoms to support the universe with communality, sharing things in common, eating together, the family. I mean, these are values that are enduring.
Thank you very much. I'm really sorry to interrupt such an interesting discussion, but the time is running. Professor Daou is looking at me. Thank you very much, Safak Pavey. Thank you, Obiora Ike. Thank you, Ignacio Baker. So we meet. And thank you, Mr. Chong. We can continue the discussion after, in a few minutes, during the reception. Thank you very much. And now it's time to meet the winners. So I will invite. Here's an applause. Thank you very much.